Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Sela Social Studies. Alright, so I left you off last time. I said we are going to cover the greatest of betrayals, and here it is. The Compromise of 1877. This is called the Great Betrayal. Who's going to get betrayed? Why do we call it a betrayal? Who becomes president and why? Those are the type of questions we're going to be looking at here. Remember that date, 1877. That's key. Alright, so there were a series of events that led to the demise of Reconstruction in 1877. There's your key date, the end of Reconstruction. And regardless of the reasons, the extinguishing of Reconstruction ended whatever forward progress African Americans had made until then and jeopardized any progress that would be made in the future. Now remember, Reconstruction had some successes. However, Reconstruction as a whole was pretty much ineffective at best. With this great betrayal placing conservative governments back in place in the South, this whole downward spiral of Jim Crow segregation is going to begin. So remember, the American Civil War drained the country's economy. Okay, as a whole, the country's economy was wiped out. I mean, everybody was suffering. Congress needed to pay millions of soldiers. They had to pay for the railroad. They had to pay to build weapons. And remember, this war took 4 years. So that was a lot of money. Now that they had to readmit these southern states back into the Union while rebuilding a nation that had been scarred by war, that's even more money that they have to put out. And less than a decade after the war was over, the Depression of 1873 struck this country, and the northern merchant economy felt the worst of this depression. So since the South had seceded from the Union, they had to create their own money and monetary system, and after the war ended, it was the North who was burdened with paying that bill of Reconstruction, and when Depression struck the North, they just couldn't afford the cost of Reconstruction anymore, which led to a Northern Reconstruction fatigue, is what we call it. And since Reconstruction went from 1865, the end of the Civil War, it would be a money and a military vacuum for 12 years. Northerners were getting fatigued by the time the election of 1876 came around. In the beginning, the Northern Americans were excited about helping the freed slaves in the South and putting the United States back together because they felt that it was their duty as Americans and it was important and exciting. But by the middle of the late 1870s, they felt that the goal that they set out to achieve just couldn't be accomplished anymore. Their feelings were that the South were never going to change their views on African Americans. They were going to never change their views on slavery. They were never going to change their views on the economy. Nothing. So another aspect of this Reconstruction that was straining the North was the length of time the military had been tied up in occupying southern states. Women missed their husbands, parents missed their children because they'd been gone for 12 long years, or at this time 11 more years. And there would only be a few times that these families could be reunited in the 1860s and 1870s because of the need of the military in the South. Northern soldiers wanted to head back home. After Andrew Johnson is impeached and does not run for re-election, President Ulysses S. Grant is swept into the presidency. The former Union general is swept into the presidency, and his administration did not do any favors for him after his election victory in 1876. Remember, war hero. They loved him. Johnson was, impeached, didn't want to come back, and it just made sense. The United States does that. If you have a very successful general, more than likely they're going to become president of the United States. He was just the pick. Grant's personal life and his choices for the administration became embroiled in scandals. It was one of the, Grant did not have a very successful presidency overall, it was embroiled in scandals. Grant was known as an alcoholic. He couldn't control his friends that he placed in the cabinet. So it was a scandal-plagued presidency that had many issues, like the credit mobilizer scandal. Let's say key administration members, they arranged for the credit mobilizer holding company to receive money and government land to build a railroad out west, and in return they had these bribes that were given, and the railroad was never built. So he was having those type of problems. Grant had no control over the Republican Party, and after 8 years of the Republican administration of Ulysses S. Grant and his scandalous presidency, the Republican Party began to lose its influence, and the Southern Democrats, this is why this is important, the Southern Democrats who had once hated America and who were hated in America began to gain this national prominence. So they were using the corruption and failures of Ulysses S. Grant presidency. He can't control his friends. He's having all these scandals going on. They're using that to start their rise to political or attempt to political dominance. And this is where the election of 1876 comes into play, known as the Great Betrayal. So since the corruption of President Grant placed the Republican Party in this major predicament of what they were going to do, they were suffering. The Democrats realized they had the opportunity to regain this political power that they lost since before the end of the war and the election of Abraham Lincoln. They felt that with the right candidate, they could be victorious. In the election of 1876, put the governor of Ohio, Rutherford B. Hayes, against the Democrat, Samuel Tilden. And in the election of 1876, the winner needed to accumulate 185 electoral votes. And towards the end of the election, the Democrat Tilden, he was leading the popular vote by 250,000 votes and had a huge lead in the electoral vote with 184. That means he only needed one more vote to win. Now, three southern states consisting of nearly 20 electoral ballots, which are these states right here, Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana, they had not cast their electoral votes yet because of some disputes. And with Tilden only needing one vote, it seemed that he had the election wrapped up. He would have no problems, and Hayes would need to win all 20 of those votes to win the election. So in order to decide the outcome of this election, a committee was put in charge of resolving all of these disputes. The committee consisted of 8 Republicans and 7 Democrats. These 15 men made a compromise that would change the outcome of the election and the direction of the United States for the next 100 years. The Compromise of 1877, otherwise known as the Great Betrayal, put the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes in office. If the election was honest, Tilden would most likely have won the nomination, or he would have won the presidency. There was a huge southern block of Democratic states with 3 red ones, or Republican ones, down in the South. Those 3 that had the argument over: South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. There's a big reason why we don't put committees in charge of things today like this, right? This committee had 8 Republicans, 7 Democrats. That's one more than the other. Most likely there was going to be a vote. The vote would sway the Republican way. So this is the Great Betrayal. So now, who's betrayed? Is Tilden betrayed? No. I mean, I guess technically Tilden was betrayed by, his party, but it's not Tilden who we're talking about in the Great Betrayal. When this Compromise of 1877 complete, it ended Reconstruction. The heart and soul of Reconstruction as a whole was not the Freedmen's Bureau. It wasn't the people in the South helping them. It was not the North funding it, but it was those military Reconstruction Acts of 1867. And it was the military that was protecting free African Americans in the South and helping them gain political office. So without the military presence in the South, Reconstruction might have not happened. So here is the compromise. What is this great compromise? That's this great betrayal. It consisted of several parts. All right, both sides of the argument had to gain in some manner. So the Northerners and the Republicans got the presidency. Hayes was elected president. Okay, so that was the key right there. Hayes was elected president, the Republican, and in the South, the Democrats got a railroad that connected Texas and California, but the most important thing that they got is they got the removal of the federal forces in the South, which effectively ended Reconstruction. All right, this is the Great Betrayal. The North gets the Republican in the office as the presidency, and the Republican Party turned their backs on all Southern freed African Americans during and after Reconstruction. Because what they said was, give us the presidency and we will pull that military out. And what that has done, it ends Reconstruction, and it allows Jim Crow segregation to thrive in the southern part of the United States for nearly 100 years.